Hello, this is Math 18, Section 3.9, Solving Equations with Fractions. So that's our one objective for today. So anytime you're asked to solve an equation, it means to find the solution of the equation. We looked at equations in quite deeply in Chapter 2, and so now we're still looking at equations again, but this time with fractions. So remember, your goal of any equation is to get the variable equal to a constant, because you want to get the x or whatever the variable is all by itself and just a plain old constant on the other side of the equal sign. So equations with fractions are solved using the exact same steps we used back in Chapter 2 when we solved equations with integers. So let me show you what we're talking about. So we're going to start with an equation that's in the form x plus a equals b. So you're going to have to add or subtract the fraction from both sides of the equation to get the variable term isolated all by itself on one side of the equal sign. Then you simplify both sides of the equation and check your solution. So look at this first equation. We have x minus 3/7 equals 2/7. Now some people are like, oh my gosh, this is horrible, equations and fractions. But you still do it the exact same way you did integers. So if we have x minus 3/7, I want to get rid of that negative 3/7 to get the x by itself. So I'm going to add 3/7 to both sides of the equal sign. Now the nice thing about this is that you have common denominators over here. So the x is going to come down, then negative 3/7 plus 3/7, that does cancel to 0, okay? And you bring down your equal sign, and we have a common denominator, so we add the numerators. 2 plus 3 would be 5/7. Okay, and that would be it. Now I'm going to check this one. I'm not checking any others because after a while that's just gross. But we'll check this one because this one's pretty easy to check. So when you plug it in for x, 5/7 minus 3/7 should equal 2/7. And 5 minus 3 is 2/7, and that equals 2/7. So it works, which is nice. Now look at number 2. We have 5/9 plus a equals negative 4/9. So we want to get the a by itself. That's what the variable you're isolating. So we want to get rid of the 5/9. It's a positive 5/9. So I subtract 5/9 from both sides. Okay? So 5/9 minus 5/9, that cancels. A comes down. Now over here we do have common denominators again, which is nice, and you have two negative numerators. Remember, if the signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. So negative 4 and negative 5 would be negative 9/9. Now you can reduce that. Negative 9 divided by 9 is just negative 1, and that would be your answer there. Okay, so here's a couple more. Negative 1/2 equals x minus 5/7. Now, the thing that's going to be a pain here is we don't have common denominators. So we're going to have to go through the steps of doing that. The x is on the right-hand side. We have negative 5/7 there. So I want to add 5/7 to get rid of that on both sides. So I'm going to add 5/7. Okay, so the 5/7 on the right cancel, and we have x. Now, here's the part where I'm going to have to make some room here. I have negative 1/2 plus 5/7. So I'm going to do the common denominators out to the left. I know we normally did them to the right, but that's the only place I have room. So 2 and 7, the common denominator would be 14. Okay? So you set that up. So we do it just like we did earlier in this chapter. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So we're multiplying 2 times 7, and negative 1 times 7 would be negative 7. Okay? And now on the bottom, 14 divided by 7 is 2. So I'm going to multiply by 2. 5 times 2 would be 10. Now look at your numerators. Negative 7, positive 10. So the signs are different. I subtract and keep the bigger sign. So I get 3/14, and the x comes down. And there's our answer. So you just have to be careful, because the worst part of this is going back and having to get the common denominators and the equivalent fractions, all that kind of stuff. Just take your time, okay? Number 4, 1/3 plus x equals -4/7. So you want to get the x by itself, which means we need to get rid of that 1/3. So I'm going to subtract it because it's a positive 1/3, and I'm going to subtract 1/3 on the other side. So the 1/3 are gone. The 1/3s cancel out. X comes down. Now over here, I do have some room out to the side. 7 and 3 are not the same, so their common denominator would be 21. So set that up. Remember, the only time you need common denominators are when you're adding or subtracting fractions. So 21 divided by 7 is 3. So -4 times 3 would be -12. And then down here, 21 divided by 3 is 7. So -1 times 7 would be -7. Now, the signs are the same, so we add and keep the sign, which would be -19 over 21. 19 is prime, so you can't do anything with that. That would be it. All right. Now, the other type of equation with fractions deals with multiplication, when you have the format of a times x equals b. So what you're going to have is you're going to have a fraction beside that x. And to get rid of that fractional coefficient, you're going to have to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that fraction. That's what you're trying to get rid of, is that fraction that's right beside the variable. So you're going to use the reciprocal. Then you simplify, and when you check your solution, you substitute it back into the original equation. And remember, if the left side and the right side equal each other, your answer is correct. Okay. So here we have 3/5 x equals 9. Now, this is not addition or subtraction between the 3/5 and the x, it's multiplication. So we have to use the reciprocal here to get rid of that 3/5. So I'm going to multiply by 5 over 3 on both sides of the equal sign, 3/5 x, and then keep the equal sign, that comes down, 5 over 3, and you're going to put 9 over 1. Okay? So, on the left, the 5's cancel out, the 3's cancel out, because if you divide by 3 and 3, you get 1 and 1, and 5 and 5, you get 1 and 1, and all we're left with is x, okay, which is what we wanted. Now, over here, we don't have any signs to worry about, but I can cancel by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. Over 1 times 1 is 1, so x equals 15. Okay? Number 2, we have seen this back in chapter 2. Whenever we have a fraction like that with just a variable on top, x over 22 equals a whole number. Remember, there's a shortcut. You just need to multiply those two numbers. So x equals -88. Technically, what you're doing is you're multiplying. Think of that coefficient in front of that x as a 1, so you're multiplying both sides by 22 over 1, which is where you get the same thing. It's just a lot easier to do the shortcut. So it's up to you how you want to do that. Okay, so here's some more examples. -2/5 x equals 6. So here, to get the x by itself, I need to get rid of -2/5. So I'm going to use its reciprocal. And remember, it's reciprocal, since it's negative, the reciprocal is also negative. So -5 over 2 times -2/5 x, and then equals -5 over 2 times, and we're going to put 6 over 1. Okay? So on the left, two negatives is going to be a positive. The 2's cancel to 1's. The 5's cancel to 1's, and we're just left with x. And on the right-hand side, remember, when you're multiplying, figure out that sign first. Hey, baby, what's your sign? What's a negative times a positive? A negative, okay? All right, and then 2 and 6, I can cancel by 2. That would leave 1, and 6 divided by 2 leaves 3. So we have 5 times 3 is 15, -15 over 1, which is just -15, okay? And number 4 here, 5 6y equals negative 20. We need to get rid of that fraction, 5 6. So again, I'm going to use the reciprocal, 6 over 5 times 5 6y. And then on the other side, 6 over 5, and put negative 20 over 1. Okay? On the left, the 5's cancel to 1's, the 6 cancel to 1's, and we just get y. On the right, we have a positive times a negative, so put your negative sign there. I can cancel 5 and 20 by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 20 divided by 5 is 4. So I have 6 times 4 is 24 over 1, so y equals just negative 24. Now a lot of these came out to whole numbers, but they won't, or integers, they won't always come out nice and even. If you get a fraction, don't freak out. Remember, you're dealing with an equation with fractions, so you might end up with a fraction answer. Okay? Alright, so here's some for you to try. Pause the video and try these on your own. Number 1, x plus 3/4 equals 5/12. So I want to get rid of the 3/4. So I have to subtract that since it's addition. So always do the opposite operation when you're solving equations. So the x comes down. The 3/4 are gone. And I'm going to work out 5/12 minus 3/4. So I need to get a common denominator there, which for 12 and 4 would be 12. Set that up. So 12 divided by 12 is 1. So 5 times 1, multiply the same thing on the top, would be 5. And on the bottom fraction, 12 divided by 4 is 3. So negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. Now, we have 5 and negative 9, so you have to subtract and keep the bigger sign. That would be negative 4 over 12. And I can reduce that by 4 on the top and bottom, so I get negative 1 over 3. And that, I should have put x equals, is what x equals. Okay? Number 2, negative 1/4 equals x minus 2/3. So the x is on the right hand side and along with the negative 2/3. So I want to add 2/3 to get rid of that on both sides. So add 2/3. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out the 2/3 and I'm going to give myself some room. I'm going to put x over here, way over here, so I can do it. And I have negative 1/4 plus 2/3. Okay, so I need to get a common denominator for 4 and 3, which would be 12. So I'm just writing them off to the left instead of to the right. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So that's what I have to multiply by. 4 times 3. So multiply by 3 on the top. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. And down here on the bottom, 12 divided by 3 is, I'm just going to change that plus sign to a 4. Multiply by 4. So multiply the top by 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So you're looking at negative 3 plus 8. The signs are different, so you subtract and keep the bigger sign, which would be 5 over 12 is what x equals. Okay? All right, here's some more. Number 3, negative 1 over 21 equals x plus 2/3. So the x is on the right hand side. I want to get rid of that positive 2/3. So I have to use a negative 2/3. So you always do the opposite operation, negative 2/3. Okay? So x comes down, the 2/3 are gone, and I'm going to have negative 1 over 21, and I'm going to add negative 2/3. So our common denominator here between 21 and 3 is 21. So set that up. All right, 21 divided by 21, I'm multiplying by 1 there. Okay, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. All right, and then on the bottom, 21 divided by 3 is 7. That's what I need to multiply by here. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. So we're looking at these two fractions, negative 1 over 21 and negative 14 over 21. The signs are the same, so I add and keep the sign. Negative 15 over 21 is what x equals. Now, most people think that's it, you're done. But look at 15 and 21. They have a common factor of 3. So I want to reduce negative 15 over 21 by 3. Let's give myself some room here. And that would be negative 5 over 7. And that's what x equals. Okay? All right. Number 4, 2/9 equals negative 2/3 y. Now look at the difference here. See how the negative 2/3 is right beside the variable? That's multiplication. So you have to, and technically the 2/3 is division, so you have to use the reciprocal. Multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal is negative 3 over 2. I'm going to put that on the left side, times 2/9, and then equals negative 3 over 2 times negative 2/3 y. Okay? So we have a negative times a positive on the left, which means it's going to be a negative. I can cancel the 2's, divide by 2, both of those by 2. That leaves 1 and 1. 3 and 9, if I divide by 3, leaves 1, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I get 1 on top, and 1 times 3 is 3. So negative 1/3. Now come over to the other side. The two negatives should give me a positive. The 3's cancel. Those cancel to 1's. The 2's cancel. Those cancels to 1. And the only thing that's left is just y. So y equals negative 1/3. All right? So number 5, negative 3/8 equals negative 6. So we need the fraction negative 3/8 to be gone. So we're going to use the reciprocal. So that would be negative 8 over 3 times negative 3/8 x, and then equals negative 8 over 3 times negative 6 over 1. So just remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do the exact same thing to the other side. So on the left, the two negatives, that's going to give us a positive. The 3's cancel to 1's. The 8's cancel to 1's. And all we're left with is x, which is what we want. If this doesn't cancel out to just x, you're doing something wrong. So that's how you know if you're on the right track or not. Now on the other side, two negatives, that's going to give me a positive. Okay? And I can cancel the 3 and 6 by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that's going to be 8 times 2 would be 16 over 1. So x just equals 16. Number 6, that is in that shortcut format. Okay? So remember that shortcut. All you have to do is multiply those two numbers. X equals 5 times negative 12, negative 60. And that should be it for 3.9. So good luck on the homework.